Welcome back to The Heat. We're discussing the high-level talks between China and the United States that have taken place in Washington, D.C. this week. Robert, let me start with you this time around. You mentioned a moment ago these two separate sets of negotiations that are taking place right now. The United States trying to get a very big trade deal done with its Asian partners, the so-called Trans-Pacific Partnership, the TPP. China, as you mentioned, conducting its own set of regional negotiations. Is this going to be a source of friction between the two countries?
I don't think it will. I think that both sides are moving in the direction of trying to create regional groupings in the area of trade. The United States would like a set of rules that are very market-oriented, very transparent, that provide certain environmental standards, intellectual property standards. The group with which China is negotiating, which is primarily ASEAN and its trading partners, may have some different ideas about some of those issues. So you would get competing regional groups, but not confrontational groups, because I think there are some countries that are members of the RCEP negotiating process that are also partners in the TPP negotiating process. So it shouldn't be, and we don't want it to be, a confrontational kind of regionalism. We want it to be more, over a period of time, integrative, so that the two groups can work together and perhaps take some of the best of what's negotiated in one group and transfer it to the other group. So I don't think this is a problem, and Premier Li Keqiang has said that China wants to cooperate with TPP, and I think that is the case. I do think there are some very important opportunities for these two countries to work together. China, under the leadership of President Xi Jinping, has developed a number of very creative, very impressive ideas for regional cooperation: an infrastructure, an Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, a Silk Road Fund. He has a number of integrative projects between China and the rest of the region. I don't think there's any reason why the United States can't work with China on a number of those institutions, because the United States has great interests in Asia as well, in supporting Asian infrastructure and supporting opportunities for building closer cooperation in the region. So I look at this as a possibility of the two countries working together quite well. On the investment front, I would simply make the point that the United States has become more open to Chinese investment. There's Chinese investment, for instance, in the natural gas Marcellus project in eastern part of the United States. It went ahead, no major problems. So I think that while the security issues are there, as one of your speakers mentioned, there are plenty of areas of opportunity for Chinese companies to invest here, and I think there'll be a discussion of that, and particularly areas where Chinese provincial leaders and mayors can work with American state governors and mayors to increase cooperation at a subnational level, where a lot of the discussion of investment cooperation takes place and should take place to an even greater degree.
Sitar, how do you see these negotiations taking place, the U.S. negotiations with its Asian partners, the Trans-Pacific Partnership? Because there are analysts who see the TPP as being used to contain China.
Yeah, well, I mean, China is not being invited to be part of the negotiation. Meanwhile, some of the economies, I don't want to name them names, they are at much lower economic development stage, and they are part of the TPP. Now, if you study the history of TPP, it actually started with a very few small economies in Asia and the Pacific. But of course, with the United States joining in, and I don't want to say being hijacked by the United States, but of course everyone knows that U.S. has the deepest market and the largest consumer market, and the market is the most attractive for everyone. So everyone has to follow the rule set by the U.S. I think the alternative, in my opinion, is not nearly as attractive as TPP, which is loosely affiliated. I think TPP really represents 40% of global GDP. I hope at some point China can join TPP, but in the short term, the door is not open for China. Now, if you look at AIIB I think everyone has been surprised by the rapid progress of AIP and the number of countries, particularly from the developed world, joining TPP, AIIB. Of course, U.S. cannot join because you already missed the deadline as a founding member. Of course, U.S. decision also affecting some other major economies, for example, Canada, Japan. So I think, you know, I hope some of these differences can be addressed. Of course, China is also changing. I think China right now sees TPP in a far more positive light than a few years ago.
Yu Chuing, talking about areas of common interest, is it likely that we'll see cooperation between the United States and China outside of just trade and the economic relationship? You know, the Washington Post had a story in which it said that there could be a growing array of hot-button issues in which these two countries could cooperate, like Iran's nuclear program, Afghanistan, the pandemic, the global pandemic, Ebola. They've already been cooperating on this. Will we see more of that?
Yeah, actually, both China and the United States have a lot of sectors to cooperate with each other. For example, you mentioned Afghanistan. Since the Obama administration's goal is try to withdraw its troops from Afghanistan by the end of 2016, so the situation, the security situation within Afghanistan really concerns not only the United States but also China and the other regional countries. So whether China and the United States can coordinate with each other or cooperate with each other in Afghanistan and this region, try to stabilize the situation and try to help Afghanistan and the other countries to develop their economies so as to reconstruct the country. So this is very important for both two countries. So in Afghanistan, we have cooperation and coordination. And then in Iran, with regard to the Iranian nuclear issue, the negotiation 6+1, actually China and the United States have a lot of coordination. And in the Middle East, actually the analysts in both two countries, they're talking about whether we can cooperate. And the answer is yes, we can. And they are now discussing what kind of things we can do together. So, and also in North Korea and in Africa, and in Latin America, actually these two countries have already made a lot of progresses together. So I don't think that for the interest of the development of this bilateral relationship, I don't think that we should focus too much on the conflicts or on the differences between these two countries. Actually, we should translate the spirit of cooperation on the global level and the bilateral level into the regional level, actually, because these two countries have quite many differences in the Asia-Pacific region. But the cooperation on the global level actually let us know that these two countries have a lot of common interests.
Robert, if we look at the big picture here, and we look at some of the numbers over the last 6 years, direct investment from China, Chinese companies to the U.S. has increased 5-fold. That's created 80,000 jobs, we are told, and that investment is expected to increase to something like $200 billion by 2020. And the figures we're hearing is that that could create up to between 200,000 and 400,000 jobs here in the United States. I was wondering if you could tell us very quickly, is that a realistic picture? Is that what we hope to see?
I think we're going to see a lot of growth. It's hard to estimate the exact number, but I think growth in Chinese investment in the United States is picking up. It's about $15 billion roughly a year today, but I certainly think it can increase. Jack Ma, the CEO and founder of Alibaba, was here.
Right.
They do a relatively small amount of their business in the U.S. They're going to be doing a lot more over time. I think there are a lot of Chinese companies that are coming here, and it's not just big state enterprises, it's a lot of private sector enterprises that are coming here and looking for opportunities to work with small and medium-sized American companies. So I'm very optimistic about it. I think it's going to continue, and as I say, I think a lot of activity will happen at the subnational level, mayors, governors, provincial leaders working together. So yes, it'll grow. We should welcome it, and I think a conversation on the framework of how we can do it in a way that's mutually beneficial is very important.
And that's where we have to leave it. Thanks to all of you for joining us.